So I think this is going to be a really rich topic, and it'll be helpful for the audience if we get a little more context from each of you about the perspective you're bringing, what kind of investing you're doing, where you're sort of meeting with entrepreneurs or young leaders, and then we can jump from there. So can I put you on the spot, Christine, to introduce yourself again?
Well, you have to be you, Alex. Christine Herron. I'm director for the Intel Capital Diversity Fund, which is a $125 million commitment we made to diverse founders a few years ago. We actually invested that fully ahead of schedule, which I think some people don't know. We announced it a couple months ago. And the context for me is, number one, I've been a female founder, so I've dealt with most, if not all, of the issues that come with being a female founder. And certainly in the last couple of years at Intel, having had this wonderful opportunity to not only set some best practices, but also actually put a lot of dollars to work.
So hi, Alicia Tillman. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer of SAP. So SAP is the largest enterprise B2B software company in the world, $30 billion in annual revenue. 180 countries, 97,000 employees, and over 400,000 customers. And I have the privilege to be a leader in an industry where there unfortunately is not gender parity quite yet, though I champion our quest for it to certainly become that. And I believe that we have made an incredible amount of traction. But certainly as I sit here with these incredibly powerful leaders on stage, I know we can achieve so much more. And so much of it is related to the celebration of success, to serve as an inspiration for what the future looks like when it comes to not only investing in women, but investing in women in technology.
So I'm Kay Koplovitz, and 18 years ago, I started an organization called Springboard Enterprises to identify women in leaders and founders in technology and life sciences and bring them to market to raise capital. To date, and it's really to build big businesses. We're all about big business at Springboard, and that's finding women transforming industries. So 730 entrepreneurs later. Get this number, if you want a big number, $8.6 billion raised for these entrepreneurs, and 86% of them raised capital. 82% of all these companies are in business today, 186 exits, and 17 IPOs. We're here to help women entrepreneurs go all the way, and I'm very positive that we're going to have a big impact on the marketplace as we go forward and work with great companies like we have here and great investors. We also invest in the growth stage of companies raising $20 million and up. Usually Series C. So,
got it. So I know when we were all kind of talking backstage, one thing that came up is sort of why is a panel like this important? What can it sort of be doing to advance the conversation in a positive way? And I think It's important that we're all here, but I think we have to be mindful of the fact that this kind of panel needs to exist in the first place. Maybe it doesn't in a few years when we all come back. So I'm curious, Christine, when you are thinking about sort of investing in women and thinking about sort of this topic, how do you stay positive? How do you kind of balance that gap that we just have talked about with the hope that Kay was talking about with some of those really impressive numbers that you've seen so far?
Right. And so I think positivity is, I'm glass half full generally, so that part's kind of established. But one of the observations that you need to make about diversity and inclusion issues is that it's a process, not a milestone. And, if you're planting, there's a difference between planting a tree and planting crops. And diversity and inclusion in general, if you're trying to affect change and representation, we're definitely in crops territory where you can't just set it and forget it. You've got to hang out. You've got to keep investing your time and your effort. You're harvesting, and then you're planting again, and you're fertilizing, and you're watering again. And that's something that every time you do it, you see another cohort of entrepreneurs, coming out the door that's a little bit more diverse. And sure, it'd be great if you could make that needle switch very quickly. When I started doing investing for the diversity fund, we were, Intel Capital was around 6% diverse. We took that up to 15%. 2017, we took that up to 22% diverse, and this year we're tracking around 27% diverse for our new investments. And those are big, meaningful changes. Ideally, they'd be a lot higher, and there again, we're planting crops. It takes more time for these entrepreneurs to go out into this diaspora, but I get excited seeing that needle move over time.
So I would say, very simply, diversity is absolutely a key in success. No question about it. So, at SAP, we develop technology for nearly every buyer on the planet, from the chief marketing officer to the head of sales, the head of HR, the head of IT, the head of operations. And when we develop technology, the cost of customization is extremely high. So we have to develop a single piece of technology and hope that it works for millions of chief marketing officers around the world. And the only way we believe you can achieve that is if you have a diverse workforce building that technology, because they will be representative of so many points of view on what the needs are and how you want to work through the nuances that are created through all the differences we have across our world. And so the more diverse your workforce is, the more you have an ability to develop a piece of technology that's going to, in fact, work for over 400,000 global customers.
Yeah.
Well, I think talking about the positive numbers is really one way of addressing this issue. But it's also on the investing side. We need to have more women on the investing side. And it's not just women investing in women. We run a program called that. And we did one here in Lisbon last week, Monday, which was quite successful. But it's really bringing together the whole ecosystem. So when you look at it in a holistic way, how do you get this done? You really need to create not only women coming in to support women and men coming into the network to do it, and seeing success, because you can't be it till you see it for a lot of people, and seeing success is really important for those role models that have to be out there. So our role is to get more energy behind identifying the successful women investing and being invested in. And I think that's what's really going to move the market. That's what my years of experience tells me we need to do, and that's what we've been doing for like 18 years now.
Wow. So just looking around the room, I see a lot of men in the audience, which I think is a good thing. And, for entrepreneurs in this crowd, maybe they're men, maybe they're women, maybe they have a mixed founding team, maybe they don't. How can they be sort of advancing these positive trends, sort of on the front lines there, if they don't have the scale of an SAP or, they're not part of one of these programs yet?
Right.
And Kay, maybe you can tell us a little bit more about, the program you guys just did as an example.
Yes, what we do is at Springboard is we identify the entire ecosystem in locations, but we work globally, actually. So we connect people on a global basis. Let me give you an example. We started in Australia 6 years ago, and we were the first accelerator that hit the national scene in Australia of any scale. And we've been identifying women entrepreneurs, but bringing in communities, bringing in the community of Sydney and Melbourne and Perth, and identifying really fantastic entrepreneurs. Even in these 6 years that we've been there, the nearly 50 companies that we brought to market, already there are 2 publicly listed on the Australian market and also on the U.S. market. So these companies have scaled on a global basis, and that's because we've invited them in to our global network of 5,000 experts in all different fields of technology and life sciences. It's an amazing, powerful message to give women who are entrepreneurs who are really striving to be sizable and global. You're in a network that's going to support you, that's going to introduce you to the right people at the right time. That's so important. I can't emphasize it enough. And women like my colleagues here are two that can really propel this forward, I think. I'm really excited that we're here together.
And Alex, I actually want to throw onto before we move past this question, a bit about what can people at a smaller company that might be in the room, like what could they do?
Yeah, if they're not in that network yet.
If you don't happen to run, an organization with, hundreds of thousands of employees, what can you do? And, the first thing you can do is, number one, don't wait. So if you have a 5 or 6 person team that's all male, that's the time to go ahead and hire that first woman. Don't wait until you have 20 people.
Yeah.
Because I can tell you, as a woman, if you walk in the door and there's 20 guys in the room, and so you're the 21st engineer and you're the first woman, you feel a certain thing. And culture comes from the top down, and you see what culture has been built before you got there. You don't feel like, it's your natural environment. And so to the extent you can think about culture much earlier in the process of developing your company, it's incredibly helpful to making a very good environment for building out that diversity. The other thing that I tend to find, very helpful in an early stage is thinking about, who are you working with, not just sort of inside the company, but outside the company? Who are your partners? And are those partners, are they cultures, and are they thinking about diversity? Do you have, female vendors? It's not just Intel supply chain management with like a $10 billion commitment. It's smaller companies, and you choose who you're going to work with too, your freelancers and designers. And thinking about, finally, what are the percentages? So when you're doing HR, there's this phrase called full representation, which I had to learn about. And full representation when it comes to diversity, they're actually talking about candidate availability. So, for example, 6% of the engineering graduates in the U.S. are African American, but the demographics of the entire United States are 16% African American. So in HR speak, full representation means you hit 6%. So there's 2 things you can do. One is to at least make sure you hit full representation. If 6% of the candidates for you are female or are, minority demographic or whatever it is you're choosing to care about, try to hit that number. And then think about later, well, what can I do to help improve what's available to me? How do I get 6 closer to 16? Can I take on an intern? That kind of thing.
Just to add on to that, so, you made a comment about the scale of SAP, and while we have the scale, I think that we also have a responsibility. And it's a responsibility to help grow the industries in which we serve. And SAP created a program called SAP.io. And it's an organization within SAP that invests in early stage startups. And in 2017, the first class that we had come through were women-led startups, and then we just finished our second class that just was completed last month. And so this is an incredible way for us to put, as you said, the scale of SAP behind women-led startup organizations, give them access to SAP technology so that they can also achieve the same scale and that we have within SAP. And it's both women-led, and it's also the next tranche that we have coming through as well are startup organizations that are focused on social good, which I think is also another really big part of diversity. And where we think about leadership of the next generation, I think getting more women at the forefront leads to more success and diversity with your portfolio, but also ideas that are really focused on helping to change the world and really putting investment and strength behind those ideas in particular, I think are those that are really interesting as well.
So to illustrate connectivity with the entrepreneur and big organizations like SAP, 5 of our entrepreneurs were in your class this year.
Yep, that's awesome.
So that is, just showing how we connect from the entrepreneur to the big scale companies and what they can do in their learning curve to help these entrepreneurs scale. And that's really the point of it, really putting the energy behind it. If you're in a big company, or if you're an entrepreneur or you're an investor at different stages, you can really put some power behind women coming to the forefront. So I applaud the SAP program. .io. It was really exciting to see our entrepreneurs there this year.
Thank you.
But so while it's great to see the support that both successful leaders and organizations are providing to these entrepreneurs, how can, let's say, the small businesses in the room help themselves on these topics? Especially if, I spoke to one prominent female VC who once said that investing in women and helping other female VCs felt like a second job that she was willingly doing, but it was extra work for her to do on top of her regular assignment. So for people who might feel like they already have their hands full with just keeping their business, growing, how do they be more mindful here? How do they contribute in a way that also helps, the bottom line?
Yeah. Well, I think there are things you can do that don't take more time. It's just a question of changing how you're doing something you already do. So for example, as an investor, and I don't know who here may have seen this research that Harvard did they released last summer around prevention questions and promotion questions. So for example, my founding team with a seasonal business, the male founder gets asked about, so what are you going to do in Q3 to make sure Q4 is fantastic? The female founder gets asked, well, what are you going to do in Q1 because your cash flow is going to dry up from Q4? It's the same company. It's the same financials. And so what I would encourage the people who invest in the room to do is, number one, be mindful and ask the same questions of men and women. Don't adjust the question, and you're not even thinking you're doing it, but it's happening. And if you're a woman in the room, it's a 7x difference in how much money you make. It's like 2.x something that if you get asked prevention questions and you answer them, you'll get that much. But it's 16 point something million tracking over years if you answer promotion questions. So be your own, sort of media consultant and redirect your answers to talk about the upside in your business. Again, you're not changing anything, but those little things you do, things like that, will make a difference, long term.
And I would also, Alex, you made a comment about the number of men in the room. Men have to be leaders of the solution, right? Because it is the dominant gender that we have, that is leading decisions, is making investment decisions and strategic decisions for companies. And so the number one way in which we can work to create greater gender parity, whether it be in company strategy or women in leadership positions or women earning the investment with their entrepreneurial ideas, is if men lead the process for making that happen. And that has to be priority number one. If you're in a meeting and there are all men represented in the room, take the stand and invite more women into the discussion. If you're making a strategic decision in your organization and there's only men represented in the decision-making process, invite women to that decision. And similarly, as it relates to deciding on where we are going to invest in the future organizations that will lead our world, let's make sure that we have great parity between women-led organizations and men-led organizations, because diversity, as I said, is the key to success. And when you do that, then the world ultimately becomes a better place.
I wanted to just give a little advice to the women in the room. We're talking about the men who are supporting us, but for the women entrepreneurs who might be in the room, I want to say you've got to really think about yourself as parity in the marketplace. We're fighting against sort of a pattern recognition of women being funded at a discount. We want to get to parity, and we should be there. We should be advanced above parity when you look at some of the returns on some of the investments. But it's the questions that you get asked. Listen carefully and make sure you answer the question you want to answer. Because oftentimes women are asked negative questions with regard to their businesses. What did you do before? What was your experience before? What was your execution before? Not about what is your idea? Where are you going? How big is your market? Answer the questions about where you're going. Everybody needs to pitch where you're going. That's what people invest in. So I just wanted to give one little piece of advice to women. I see it every day. I want you to be big. I want you to be successful, sustainable, create wealth for yourself and your employees. That's how we're going to win.
Yes.
On that note, thank you so much for the insights.